one. Hello and welcome to yet another episode of the Back to the TARDIS podcast, the podcast where we take a look at every single episode of the 2005 revival of BBC's Doctor Who. I'm Jeff.
Hello, I'm Skylar.
I'm a fucking secret you don't get to know this time.
Alright. And this week, as part of our monthly series of non-New Who related episodes, we will be discussing classic Season 12, Serial 4, Genesis of the Daleks by Terry Nation. This story carries on... I think carries on directly from the previous episode and the episode before that, where it's kind of like they got separated from the TARDIS and are trying to get back to it. So in their second attempt of trying to teleport back to the TARDIS and being missing it or being intercepted, the Fourth Doctor, Sarah Jane Smith and Harry Sullivan are intercepted by a Time Lord who tasks the Doctor with wiping out the Daleks before they have a chance to spread and going back to their creation on Skaro. This is notable for, I think, being one of... How many more stories did Terry Nation write for the show? Let's see. Okay, he did a couple more. But, this is generally regarded as Terry Nation's best script for the show. From what I understand, a lot of his Dalek scripts, post, the First Doctor especially, kind of got criticized for kind of rehashing shit or being, formulaic or not too great. So he was actually asked by the production team to do something a little bit different this time. And he came up with this instead. And I think it's just this incredible, slowly building 2-hour sense of dread as you can feel this train fucking crashing and there's pretty much nothing anyone can do to stop it. Because the people in power are either, actually no, they're pretty much just either evil or stupid. How like real life.
Yeah, I mean, I think, one of the interesting things is that you do have people, trying to stop it, but they're just... The thing is, they everything jumps into motion, or, things have already been in motion for so long that, when they try to resist them, they're like... okay, honestly, I think, I'm skipping ahead of it, but just the sort of end part where they're like, Davros, we're gonna democratically vote you out is a really...
Yeah,
I feel like that's a moment that holds up.
Yeah, it very much feels relevant because it's what, you're gonna take the moral high ground against fucking Nazis? And the best part is all of these people were the people who were supporting him to do these brutal experiments and things to crush this other race. So it's you guys don't have any moral superiority here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's really the moment of I can't believe the leopards would eat my face, says woman who voted for the leopards eating people's faces party.
Yeah, exactly. And it's probably the place, because you have humanoids in this episode, it's probably the most overt Daleks equals Nazis episode. I don't know if you noticed, but, in the first few episodes, Niter is straight up wearing an Iron Cross until,
I was about to say that.
3, the production team went, no, that's too on the nose, take that off.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I was a little confused about the messaging at first because they do have it set in, or the war is very World War I aesthetics, but then I saw, and they even give them the very, they give them very Nazi-like uniforms, they give them Nazi-like insignias. The one guy is wearing a literal Iron Cross for half of the story, and even just the mannerisms they use are very stereotypically. Nazi, I mean, the messaging is not subtle here.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Geoff, Doctor Who hasn't been political.
Yeah.
I can't believe they would put politics in Doctor Who.
Yeah. So it's also very interesting because like I haven't seen that much other Dalek stories. I have seen their first appearance a very long time ago. I don't remember much of it, but
Yeah,
what I
same.
do remember is that the Thals were generally presented as kind of stupid but still virtuous, whereas here like it's like no, they're both trying to brutally completely wipe each other out.
Were the
And
Thals
it's-
still
it's-
alive in the first one? I can't remember.
Yes, they're still around. They generally in the earlier stuff they did show up and were generally sort of kind of stupid good, virtuous, like absolute virtue to sort of contrast with the absolute hatred, I guess. But it's like no, here they're basic, like the only reason they're not as bad is because they didn't make the Daleks. That's about it. Like they're totally willing to listen to Davros, and that's another thing I'll mention. Davros in this episode is portrayed in a way that I think the only time I've really felt like he's gotten close to that was like that I've seen has been Magician's Apprentice, and even then it's nowhere near as much, where he is just pretty much always in control and playing all sides constantly. He's not technically as capable as the Daleks combat-wise, but the sheer level of irons he has in the fire and his intelligence makes him equally as terrifying.
For sure. I remember in Journey's... Is it Journey's End? Fuck if I know. In his first appearance in the revival,
Yeah.
I very much got like this is just the insane mad scientist who had one good idea and like that's what took off. But watching this, it's like, okay, you know, he's clearly also a strategist.
Yeah.
And he's politically savvy.
Yeah.
And it, you know, the scientist part works to his advantage because that people don't expect that from him. So it was, I definitely found him more interesting than I thought I would. Even it's especially impressive, like that you can get that level of like intrigue and like build that type of interesting character even behind like the frankly ludicrous amounts of like prosthetics and makeup that they have on him.
He's basically not moving his face at all, but he still makes it work.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, one, Geoff, goddammit, you said too many irons in the fire, and that made me think of
Yeah,
Davliska.
I knew exactly what was gonna happen there.
And two, yeah, no, I think, like, his role as a strategist, like, I think what really makes this story unique is that it's a story where at every moment Davros is the active agent and the Doctor basically does nothing, like nothing of like actual impact for this entire thing. Because Davros, this is like the culmination of probably decades-long master plan, and the Doctor just waltzes into the chessboard when things are already like 3 moves from checkmate. And so he basically just runs back and forth between the two cities trying to do something, accomplishes nothing, and then fucks off because, like, what the fuck can he do? And that's, it's a really interesting story because in almost every other story I can think of, he might start off on the back foot, but he almost always ends up, like, impacting things in some way.
It's really notable that it is an episode where he pretty much concretely fails.
Yeah.
And even at the end, like, they try to pass it off as, like, a happy ending. But even at the end, Sarah Jane's like, wow, you really fucked that one up, didn't you?
And he's like, yeah, kinda. No, I mean, yeah, like, there's other episodes where he fails, but it's never quite, like, it's always like he's impacted things, and then it's like his own folly got in his way, or like some shortcoming of his got in his way. But no, like, this is a case where he was just absolutely, like, fucking outclassed. There was nothing he could do. And you know, I sort of want to go back to the idea of Davros as a scientist, because I think you sort of get very interesting commentary on like the marriage of science and military in this, and I think that's very fitting, because you know, they're sort of talking about, you know, it's again the Nazi commentary, and the scientists are sort of portrayed as Nazi scientists. And I think the line that most caught my interest was when they first like get brought in for processing, and they get sent to the scientist, and he's like, "Oh, you're a scientist, you know, maybe I can talk reasonably with you." And he's like, "Yes, I'm a scientist, you know, we do things differently here. But if you get too uppity, then I'll send you right back to the military, and they'll stick a gun in your face." And I think that very succinctly sums up the like messages on science in this story.
Yeah, and so yeah. And it's like, I will also say, like, it's still 70s Doctor Who, so it still looks like it was running on the budget of 25 cents and a dead fish, but it uses it so well. Like, yeah, there's the standard BBC quarry in the beginning, but this desolate, cloudy quarry with dead World War I-esque looking like soldiers and gas and landmines just instills this fucking oppressive atmosphere that works so well.
Yeah, they use what they have cleverly.
Yeah. And like the fact that like all the bases look cheap, but it kind of works because you get the sense that like both sides are on their last legs.
And I think another dimension to that is, like, you know, I sort of started thinking about Doctor Strangelove. I don't know if you've seen it, but there's this sort of conception of the portrayal of, there's, you know, the sort of portrayal of the war is you have these two dimensions to the war. You have the inside people and the outside people, and we mostly see the inside people in this one, but you, at the very beginning, you get to see the outside people, and you see like how people are living, and then you move inside to, like, you know, they're cheap, but they're sterile, they're you know, they're totally isolated, there's no windows, you don't see outside, they're just isolated compounds where they're moving things around on a map, and literally just, you know, they build the weapons there and then they send them out, and as far as I can tell, they never even like look outside. The building is built to like be isolated, and obviously that's a conceit of set making in this context, but it really works in this setting.
Yeah, and it's like they're thrown onto this planet, and immediately, like, 4 almost kills everyone by stepping on a landmine. They get gassed, are pulled into this interrogation, separate, like Sarah is separated from the rest of the group. They're pulled into this interrogation room, or not an interrogation room, but they're pulled into this military base and just screamed at by this super, like, oppressive dude. And it's just like, it sets this at, like, aside from like the slight diversions with like the plastic crabs or like the plastic clams that look kind of shitty, aside from that, like, it manages to maintain this super oppressive atmosphere. And it's like, given how slow paced and talky this episode is, I wonder how like kids in 74 thought about this episode, because it doesn't feel very for kids or families at all. Like, it's super slow, it's dark, it's brutal, and the Doctor fails.
Yeah, for an episode ostensibly about the start of these salt and pepper genocidal maniacs, it's honestly impressive how diversified the portrayal of fascism and these like structures and war and desolation are. Like, you get a point of view of basically how this affects everybody. You get the Mutos, you get the Thals, you get the you get different perspectives from the why am I forgetting their names? Khaleds. Yeah, you get their different perspectives, so it's just, and how like different people in that oppressive structure enact their like loyalty or whatever. It's very impressive in what it manages to do, again, with kind of like a silly sci-fi like trapping, but like still make you invested in everything. And the fact that like you don't even need the Daleks, you don't even need the monsters to have that terror. And just everything is just, yeah, as you said, that building of 2 hours of dread. I never felt bored, really. There were some times where I was like, oh, okay, if this was like in modern television, they wouldn't have a sequence where Sarah and others try to escape and then they fail. That probably it would probably just be they're there and then the Doctor rescues them. But aside from like small moments like that, this was like almost everything in this story felt like it had purpose, and even the parts of the story which I like don't like, I could see why they're there.
Mm-hmm. And like I will also say, like, a note, there's a couple things to think about in sort of how this applies to modern. And of course we're watching this because we watched Asylum of the Daleks last week, and compared to this is a fucking trash Dalek episode. But the other things to think of is, like, RTD kind of stated that, like, in retrospect, this kind of is the first shot in the Time War. Or at least, like, a first major action in a sort of Cold War between the two powers that eventually leads to the Time War. And the other thing is, like, after, like, watching this, it makes you really understand, like, Sarah Jane's reaction to the Daleks in the Stolen Earth. Because, like there are Dalek stories of varying severity, but, like, this is up there with, like, the series 1 Dalek episodes in terms of just sheer brutality.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, you know, in this one the Daleks are a lot weaker. They're not yet just like, I can destroy an army by myself. They still have a lot of vulnerabilities, but just like the very concept of it is already just so powerful. And, you know, I would say, you know, obviously the Daleks as a product act as a sort of metaphor, or I mean, they are a metaphor for, like, the most distilled perfect fascism. They're like this union of like they're of modern machinery and you know, warped humanity into this machine of hate. And it's obvious, you know, and then the how it plays out in the end, just sort of, because you mentioned that you sort of get to see how these things affect every single group, and you know, what's sort of the ultimate moral of it is that nobody wins. The only thing that ends up living, the only thing that comes out of this is those machines of hate. In the end, everyone is consumed by the quest for perfection, you know, quote unquote perfection in that twisted sense.
It's so good with the fact that, like, they're the perfect encapsulation of, like, an unwavering commitment to dogma and to the ideals and to the nationalism, to the purity whatsoever, to the point where it's like they're self-destructive, and I think you could make a decent argument that fascism is inherently self-destructive. Because essentially, you know, they're becoming, what the Daleks are fighting to keep pure doesn't even exist anymore. Certainly not by the time we get to, like, the fucking revival or even to the Time War. Like, they're fighting.
The Daleks exist for their own sake at this point.
Exactly. It's,
and
like,
there's kind of that point too, of, like, Davros essentially, like, it even removes, like, it makes this interesting sort of thought experiment of, like, say, since most fascism and nationalism is based around the idea that your country or ethnic group is superior to a different one, what happens when the superior thing is all that's left? You start taking that too and destroying it. Because, like, by the end of the episode, Davros has wiped out both the Thals and the Khaleds because he doesn't even care about his own race anymore. He wants to make this pure race of completely pure fascists who will then in future episodes fire on themselves for their own supposed imperfection.
Yeah, and that's where the central moral dilemma, I think, is brilliant and would work if this was any other species other than the Daleks.
Yeah.
because the
think,
idea of like time isn't, you know, fixed or whatever, and maybe, you know, maybe I know this race as killers, but maybe they can become something better. Maybe one day they realize the error of their ways. Like, I could buy that with almost any other race, I think. But the fact that it's, like, the Daleks, which are basically, like, fascism perfected, and it's just like, well, maybe they can change. I'm just like, can they, though? Like, it's a brilliant moment, and it, you know, Tom Baker sells it. Everything in that scene is perfection. I'm not taking away from that. It's just like the episode and the script does such a good job of saying like, no, this is like the worst it can get, and to be like, well, I'm still gonna let it slide. It's a little contradictory. Like it undercuts itself a little bit in how powerful it could be, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, I think for me, kind of my take on the moral dilemma is that if you view it as a moral dilemma that the episode is presenting to its viewers, it falls apart. If you view it as a moral dilemma on the character's perspective, I think it makes sense, because 4 is not 7. He's not this cold, world-weary Machiavellian schemer. He does not have it in him to commit a genocide, and will do everything he can to try and stop this in a sensible manner first. And I think it adds to this the tragic nature of the episode, and it's kind of, and it gets called back to later, where it, you know, like Rose questions Nine's actions, and it leads to the point where he can't wipe out the Daleks in Parting of the Ways and says coward every time. It's sort of this nice continuity of, Four does kind of have that thing where he kind of acts the clown and buffoon a little, but is to hide his true depths. But even then, even at his true depths, he does not have it in him to commit genocide. No,
you know, it's a shame 13 wasn't here, because she could just give it to someone else and then bail.
I mean, he technically does, if you think about it. He leaves the wires on the floor and a Dalek runs over them.
Yeah,
hate when that happens.
You know, I think you sort of mentioned the playing the clown, and I think it's interesting because he sort of tries to do that early on.
Yeah,
he tries.
No,
he tries to.
I love this scene where he's like, "All right, turn out your pockets," and he just fucking pulls out so much shit out of his pockets.
No, I mean, yeah, and it sort of, when he starts going through processing, he's really still in, like, you know, talk no jutsu mode, where he's like, all right, I'm gonna fast talk these guys, it's gonna work out, and they're just like,
I'm gonna make fun of the Nazis.
They're just like, dude, what the fuck are you doing? I'm literally going to shoot you. I have a gun. I will kill you. I do not care. And then he's sort of like, oh, okay.
Yeah, definitely. By the way, I'm not sure, is this your guys' first episode that you've watched with Tom Baker?
I watched when BBC, leading up to the 50th, they did that whole, like, each Doctor remembered thing. I saw the episode, I think it's with the mummy, or the sarcophagus.
Pyramids of Mars?
Yes, that, sorry.
Okay.
I knew it had something to do with, like...
Yeah,
it had something to do with Egyptian iconography.
Yeah,
so that was a while ago. I don't quite remember all of it, but from what I do, I was like, oh yeah, this is definitely 4. This is definitely that guy. I forget if Harry Sullivan was in that. This might have been my first introduction to him.
I don't think Harry Sullivan was in that. Harry Sullivan is kind of a useless character, I'm not gonna lie.
I do like, I don't know, just a scene that helped me.
Harry Sullivan is pretty much like, he's not, you don't see it in this episode because this episode's fairly serious.
Sure.
But generally Harry Sullivan is around for 4 to make fun of. That's about it.
Okay.
He's there to be the boring normal guy.
I don't know. I was kind of endeared to him. Like, it's just like you don't get this dynamic much anymore, where like the companion saves the Doctor from doing some dumbass shit, because the Doctor in the revival, like, usually doesn't get himself fucked over that easily. So, like, that was a nice moment, but I see what you mean. I can see how, like, outside of like S tier stories like this that, he wouldn't have much to do.
Yeah.
And I've seen a VHS tape of City of Death that my cousin owned like ages ago, so I don't remember it well.
I haven't seen that one, but I remember that one being highly regarded. Yeah. So
I think it was like the
most
most watched when it aired. It's like the
Yeah.
last episode was the most watched Doctor Who airing.
So like you're both sort of familiar with 4, who I'd say like after 8, 4 is like, yeah, your quintessential classic Doctor. Like, he's good. Tom Baker does have an occasional tendency as he goes on to get a little bit over hammy and just try to steal the scene from everybody else. But here it's like the right mix. He definitely has like the most alien features. Like, you don't see it that much in this episode, but his smile is really creepy, and he has this like weird ability to make his eyes sort of like boggle out of his head.
Yeah.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
You get it a bit in the scene where they're like, he's like, well, you can't be an alien, and he's like, all right, check it, and then he's like, all right, well, I'll look at your blood work and then we'll see, and then the doctor just like gives him this like wild ass smile, like, yeah, bitch, what do you see, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, it's great. Yeah.
I think the it didn't, it's not like a major plot point, but sort of the detail that they have scientifically disregarded the potential of alien life.
Yeah,
is an interesting note.
And it takes up until like he actually gets face to face with Davros for Davros to be like, oh, okay, you're actually not from here.
Yeah. It's really interesting because I think it really plays into that like mentality of like they have become so worldly focused on their war that they literally just can't conceive of anything outside of their war.
Yeah.
And it's sort of that like complete modern materialist mindset that sort of ties into fascism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, and there is like it's a very sort of slow build of like finding these Daleks and going back and forth between the Khaleds and the Thals. One thing that I really like, I mentioned this before, but the thing that I really love, that I feel like kind of really sends home this episode, is like it feels kind of like this like kind of darkly comedic send up of maybe not like neoliberals, but like kind of like that brand of conservative where it's like the Thals supposedly win by horribly like using, I don't know about nukes, but some form of chemical warfare that they made POWs work on because they knew that it would kill them. Launched this, destroyed this dome, including a couple named characters in the episode. And they're just like, yeah, okay, we're going to be gracious winners. Let's be merciful to our those who survived. And then, of course, they get horribly murdered by the Daleks, and they were getting played by Davros all along. It's like between that and the scientists who, like, remember, like, the dude who's wearing, like, a straight-up mock-off on a Nazi uniform and is like, no, we're going to have a bloodless revolution. Like, I don't feel like I feel like that some of this is sort of my perspective reading into this, but it definitely feels like there's some commentary there of like, you guys ain't any fucking better, and your moral high ground isn't going to save you here. Like, if you wanted to actually stop this, you would have pulled out the guns that you have and fucking filled them with lead.
Yeah, it's something where, like, I really want to know. I don't know if there's any expanded universe shit on this. There probably is, but just the politics of, like...
I think, well, okay, maybe not the politics. I believe there is actually fairly highly regarded Davros origin-centric Big Finish story.
Yeah, I think I saw it referenced when I looked at his wiki today, but it's just... it's like a double-edged thing for me, because I kind of want to know the politics of like how this all got started. Like, was it the college strictly who were supremacists, or were the Thals also in on it? And the Mutos obviously are kind of like, quote unquote, as close to apolitical in this conflict as you can get. But it's almost to the point where like thousands of years have gone by. Neither institution is really meaningfully democratic or really serving the interests of their people anymore. It's like they've gotten to it's the cliche of like they've been fighting for so long that like the reason for it has kind of disappeared, because the Khalids are like, oh, we're fighting for supremacy, but as the Daleks demonstrate, that supremacy doesn't really have any like pure essence or form anymore. So it's again just another way that it's a commentary on the fight of like fascism versus neoliberalism, or like maybe the Thals are also fascist, just in like a more like dressed up, like imperialism, like Western-esque friendly way.
Yeah.
Like it's good shit.
It kind of reminds me of an analysis of a game that I really like called Killer 7, which is also sort of very political, though not necessarily, like a little bit more subtly than this episode is, where like this analysis basically put together the sort of hypothesis that one of the major themes of the game is sort of that neoliberalism is in this abusive relationship with fascism or conservatism and will always capitulate to it. And I feel like that's kind of a core theme of the episode here, where it's like it really feels like, are you even trying? Like, he's made these insane killing machines that he can clearly control from his wheelchair, and you're gonna just try and walk in and peacefully depose him with a tribunal?
Yeah, it's very, again, there's even though you could argue that the most like evil aspects of like the Khalid society and of this episode are like individuals, it's very much also a critique on the inefficiency of certain systems, particularly like fascism in defending itself from itself, and the Thals and just being like, oh, well, I guess we'll take this and we won't examine this. You know, Davros says it perfectly. It's just like they just want to fight. Like, it doesn't matter. I give them a silver bullet and they'll take it because they have a gun and they want to load it. Like, it doesn't matter where the bullet comes from. So yeah, just I don't know. I'm gonna end up repeating myself eventually. Aside from the central moral dilemma, this episode is like fucking perfect, virtually.
Yeah. And I think it really is like I you know, like I'm not that familiar with Terry Nation's other work, but from what I've heard, this really is like by a long shot the best episode he's written. Like they pushed him this time to actually be like, no, don't give us the same old shit. Give us something new, give us something good. And he delivered, and it was really good.
Does any revival Dalek story match up against this or surpass it?
Dalek. Not necessarily. Okay, so here's the thing. Dalek, and by extension, because it's based on Jubilee. Well, actually, no. Jubilee is actually pretty political, but in a different way. But I'd say Dalek itself doesn't necessarily, because like it's got some light elements from Jubilee, and obviously it was written by the same person as Jubilee, but it's not really the same beast at all. I would like Dalek sort of focuses it on it more on an individual level than a political level, whereas this feels like much more heavily on the political side of things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd think the only revival episode I can think of to tackle the Daleks in any remotely similar way would be, well, Dalek, yeah, but also Into the Dalek, just because it focuses on like the internal hatred and how it's manufactured and cultivated.
That episode, I don't hate it, but I like, from what I remember, it's kind of meh.
Yeah, I mean, we'll definitely see, but this in terms of the general scope and how much an episode manages to say about the Daleks and about, the larger, themes that it's trying to communicate, I think this still wins out over any modern Dalek story.
Yeah.
Obviously, Dalek is trying for something more smaller scale, and it definitely pulls it off.
I think because Dalek isn't trying, it succeeds about as well as this because it's trying to do a completely different thing. And instead of focusing on the political side, focus on the individual side and focus on their relationship with the Doctor and how, like, their constant fight has shaped the character.
Okay, yeah.
I think it works on... I think it's about equal on that level. And I would say that, like, if we're going to go back to the more political side of things, I think Jubilee is probably the second best Dalek story that's out there. Like, tied with Dalek for it. Like, Jubilee is really, really good. So I would actually make a note here. Not only does the Doctor not win, he almost makes it worse because, like, he manages to set them back, but they almost got all the knowledge of, like, the Doctor's prior encounters with them out of him. And
how did they lose that again?
I think it's just because, like, I think, first of all, didn't they get into the safe where it was in?
I think so, yeah. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then even if they didn't, like, the person who knew, like, the Daleks can't operate that safe. And the only person who knew that would have been, like, the only people who knew that would have been in there would have been Niter and Davros, both of whom died. So, yeah. It's like he almost made it worse, in a way. But yeah, no, it's like, it also, I feel like on it, like, I feel like the scenes between 12 and Davros in The Magician's Apprentice are good, and they do kind of go for a different vibe. They go for more of a long-standing enemies thing as opposed to this equals meeting each other for the first time thing. But I do think those scenes where, like, like Davros is like, let us talk not as prisoner and interrogator, but of men of science, like, those are, like, really electrifying scenes because you can feel him trying and Davros just completely, like he even comes up with this, like, virus thought experiment, and Davros is like, fuck yeah, dude.
Yeah, I mean, it really is just a showcase of the complete hopelessness of the situation where the Doctor, he does everything that normally works. Because we've sort of had episodes in the past where it's like the Doctor comes up against a situation that he that's, like, not about talking, and so it fucks him up. Like, I think Midnight, right? That's what I'm thinking of. We sort of talked about
Midnight,
how in that situation, him trying to talk his way out of it actively makes things worse. And this is a situation where, like, talking theoretically could work, but nothing the Doctor would say works. And so it's not even like he's failing because it's not playing to his strengths. It's playing to his strengths, and there's just someone better than him at his strengths here.
Yeah. And, like, it even gets to the point where he actually threatens to cut off Davros's life support, and that still doesn't work because Davros is a step ahead of him.
I know this isn't the fault of this episode by any means, but I think forward to The Magician's Apprentice and Witch's Familiar, and about how, like, oh, the Doctor saved Davros, and that's why, like, the Daleks kind of have a concept of mercy. Like, shut the fuck up. Like, they obviously don't, and obviously that's not a continuity error when we're talking about an episode made, like, 40 years ago or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's just humorous to me that that's a thing they think they can do with this character when it's so obvious
Yeah.
that, like...
Yeah. I don't even hate I like Magician's Apprentice, but I will admit, like, it's not it does some not too great stuff that kind of cheapens this. Which, you know, it's also unfortunate because, like, even when they were making the episode, the production team were like, yeah, this character's too good to just kill him off for good after one episode. But the ending that he gets is, like, super chilling and super appropriate.
Yeah. I kind of, when someone asked in the group chat earlier before we started recording, it's just like, how does Davros suddenly become okay with the Daleks? It's just like, that's kind of just like I prefer the Journey's End answer, where it's just like, they recognize that because of his mind, he improves them and, like, makes them better, but they don't really hold him in equal regard. I kind of like that interpretation, that is just, like, out of pure pragmatism, which the Daleks usually aren't, but yeah.
Okay, the explanation that they gave in the next Dalek serial and the next time that he appeared is a fucking cop-out. It is, they only actually damaged his primary life support system. The secondary and backup circuit switched on immediately, placing him in suspended animation while his life support worked to regenerate him. And then the Daleks try and find him and revive him so that he can offer them a way out of the impasse in their war with a different species that's classic specific, and I don't think people like very much. So yeah, it's
continuity.
No, like, even the episodes with Davros that I like do not use the character as well as the character is used here. Because, like, I understand why they're like, we can't kill this guy off after, like, one story, but also, this is the only ending that makes sense for him, because it's the only ending that makes sense with the themes and the idea of this perfect fascism.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I get, like you said, I get why he's brought back just for practical reasons. But it's sort of, it's almost, you know, it is a lot like the end, sort of the season 6 ending with Amy. Like, it's, this works. This is the logical conclusion of everything we understand about this character and their situation. Like, there's no other way this could end than, like, the Daleks swallowing even their own creator.
Yeah. A perfect Ouroboros, yes. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, at the end, you know, he blows up this incubator room, but even he admits, like, I'm not sure why he has all this, like, moral quandary then, because, like, he admits that, like, yeah, I blew up the incubator room, but that only sets him back 1,000 years. And they just kind of, they get out of the base, Davros dies, and they're just like, all right, bye, I guess. And, like, dip out to, like, a shitty green screen of, like, a field of stars.
Yeah, it's that, what is it? It's almost kind of like good things can come from bad shit, and, like...
Yeah, no, I think this episode is really great. I kind of feel like, in some ways, I wonder if that ending was something that, like, the producers or the script editor or even Terry Nation himself kind of stepped in and realized, hang on a second, this is a family show. We can't admit that they totally, like, failed, even though they totally did, because, like, it's a family show.
I'm not even opposed.
So they kind of have to, like, try and, like, walk it off like they succeeded at the end. It's like the TV show equivalent George W. Bush in a flight suit standing on the deck of an aircraft carrier with mission accomplished behind him. That's what the ending is.
Yeah, it felt very like... I hate to, like, use this term because people on the...
It is the fucking meme of, we did it, Patrick, we saved the city.
Yeah, that, or, like, getting on a soapbox and being like, we may have fucked everyone, but we have the moral high ground. It's just like, well, okay, I guess. I wouldn't even be opposed necessarily to a quote-unquote, like, positive message, like, ending-oriented. Like, if it had just been, like, obviously you would use different words than this, but, like, yeah, you know, there may be fascism, but, like, fascism always loses eventually.
The
because
Thals
like,
are still alive and still fighting, and so must we.
Yeah, like, there's, you know, sure, the drought will always come, but surely the drought also must always end. Like, something like that, where it's just, like, talking more naturally about, like, how things will go, instead of some sort of, like, pop psych bullshit about how, like, hey, I know this horrible shit happened to you, but be grateful because, like, some positive shit may happen afterwards.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Anything else before we move on to ratings here?
I will kind of retract one thing I said earlier about me not seeing any purpose in Sarah Jane trying to coordinate an escape. I did realize that it is a good instance, probably the only instance of showing how, like, hey, when people of, like, different backgrounds and different ideas can get together, like, you can actually accomplish shit. Like, when the Nazis, when the Khalids aren't fighting with the Mutos, and, well, Sarah Jane isn't, like, an alien, but, like, for all intents and purposes, like, she could be a Thal or whatever. Like, if you ignore the superficial bullshit that doesn't matter and get along, you can accomplish something that's, like, you would think impossible. So I do like that angle of things, even though it probably is a sequence that I would say still takes too long, and the cliffhanger where Sarah Jane is falling is fucking stupid. But aside from that, yeah, it was a good sequence. Anyways, that's all I have to say.
Also, the companions are a little underutilized, but it's classic Doctor Who. Like, unless it's Ace, the companions are always underutilized in comparison. Unless it's, like, Chibnall era. Yeah. Alright, so yeah, moving on to ratings. It's an absolute classic. There is a reason why it and Caves of Androzani are generally cited as the best episodes of Doctor Who, though I would also actually note that both of those episodes are both grim and depressing and unfun as fuck. So I'm noticing a pattern here. But yeah, no, it's this masterpiece of slowly building and creeping dread and political intrigue and excellent acting and use of the show's traditional shoestring budget, with great performances all around. Tom Baker is on top form here, and it's no surprise that he considers this a personal favorite of his. Yeah, it's just an absolute classic, S tier.
Yeah, this is a really impressive script, really impressive design and execution. Acting, though it's like 70s ham, it still manages to get across all the layers and nuances of the story. It's a great monster story. It's a great political thriller. It's a great, you could argue, almost like psychological or existential horror or political horror. And yeah, if it weren't for, like, the two minor fumbles of, like, the moral dilemma, which you could justify, and the end, which I don't think you can justify. The end message just kind of, like, fucks off and decides to do its own thing. Aside from that, this episode is a masterclass in sci-fi storytelling. I think this is quintessential best Doctor Who and best pinnacle sci-fi in general. It's a light S tier. If if the moral dilemma was like more solid for me and the ending was solid for me, it would be strong S tier, but it's still S.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, this is just a really compelling piece of political drama, I'd say. I mean, that's honestly how I'd describe it. It's a sci-fi political drama that's just the Doctor is there, but I wouldn't say it's really a Doctor story. It is more a political drama told through the perspective of the Doctor. And it's wonderful. I think just all the messaging and writing is really solid. Once it sort of gets going and gets past the early hokiness, it's absolutely fantastic in its writing and just sort of the presentation and the pacing of it all. So I would say it's a definite 10 out of 10. Woo!
Yeah. All right. So next week, there is not going to be an episode next week. There will be another break because some stuff like Skylar's got some work stuff going on, and I'm going to have some people visiting. So yeah, we'll be back the week after, and we will be talking about... Oh, shit. Oh, yeah, we're talking about fucking dinosaurs on a spaceship next time. Talk about a whiplash. Also, we went the entire 51-minute episode without mentioning the fact that Chibnall is leaving.
What?
That's how good this episode is. Wait, did you miss that?
I missed that.
How the fuck did you miss that? We were talking about it on the server.
I don't check the server.
What the fuck? Yeah, dude, Chibnall and Jodie are leaving at the end of 2022.
So they're getting one more season?
They are getting one more season and 3 specials.
I see. Okay, so Jodie's going to end up with 4 seasons total.
No,
this season will be her last. And then the 3 specials, I assume, are 2022.
Did you miss the fact that this season is also going to be like a 6-part story?
Yes, I did miss that.
Holy shit, you missed everything! What the fuck, man?
Okay, but it's gonna really suck if this is actually a great story and then Chibnall leaves.
Yeah. No, dude, yeah.
Go out on a high note.
Chibnall and Jodie are leaving, and we don't even know who's coming in to replace them.
Wow. Yeah. Okay.
We just know that they're leaving. All right. Well, you can follow us on Twitter at back at B2 TARDIS Pod. You can support us on Patreon for a number of benefits, such as early access to episodes, the ability to listen in live to episodes being recorded, and potentially even the ability to guest star on an episode of your choosing. I'm Jeff. You can follow me on Twitter at WheatleyDL.
I don't know. I'm part of Antifa, cause fuck fascism. Fuck salt and pepper Dalek fascists. There you go. I don't know. Fuck you. And you can follow me.
Joke this week.
Yeah. You can follow me at skyhigh9_5 on the twitter.com.
I am an Italian denialist, and bye.
You're denying me?
I'm sorry, Skylar. You don't exist. We made you up.
Based in True Hill.
We will see you all next week.